Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 1155, introduced by Representative Lozier, Esbecker, and Schatz, and Senator Armstrong. House Bill 1155 is a bill for an act to amend and reenact Section 15-10-46.1 of the North Dakota Century Code relating to the University of North Dakota athletic nickname and logo to provide for retroactive application and to declare an emergency. Mr. Speaker, this has a fiscal note prepared by the North Dakota University System. The analysis indicates $106,600 of general fund expenditures. Mr. Speaker, your Education Committee recommends do not pass on House Bill 1155 by a vote of 9 yeas, 2 nays, and 2 absent not voting. Mr. Speaker.
Representative Mock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, House Bill 1155, we dubbed the University of North Dakota nickname bill. Before I go into the committee discussion and the specifics of the bill, though, I'd like to just go through briefly, as the committee had heard, a brief history of how this bill has come before us. In 2011, this Assembly took a step forward, got into the nickname business, and mandated that the University of North Dakota be recognized and use the nickname and logo of the Fighting Sioux indefinitely. In 2012, a referendum, after much debate and unfortunate for the proponents, many defeats from the NCAA, the University people of North Dakota petitioned and brought this ballot, brought the bill that you have before you, the moratorium, along with the repeal of the university nickname and logo to the voters, passed by a substantial margin, 67%. The name was repealed and a moratorium was put in place. That moratorium existed from June 2012 until January 1st of this year, 2.5 years, from which the University of North Dakota was prohibited from adopting or implementing a new nickname and or logo. House Bill 1155 contains 3 sections. Section 1 extends the moratorium from the 2.5 years, which expired nearly 2 weeks ago, until July 1st of 2017. Section 2 of the bill makes the effect of this bill retroactive in nature. And Section 3 is the emergency clause, which requires 2/3 vote to pass in order to make that retroactive component applicable. Mr. Speaker, the University of North Dakota, we've learned, has commissioned a task force of 13 members. The 13 members on this task force have been tasked specifically to identify a process from which the university can implement and adopt a new nickname and or logo. They are not in the business of choosing the name or even eliminating options, but merely identifying the proper process from which the university can use to move forward. The 13 members on this task force include 4 members of the UND alumni from around that represent the community and the institution, 4 student members, including the student body president, and 2 student athletes, 2 members of UND faculty, and 3 members of UND staff. Over the last 4 months, this task force has traveled across the state and held public meetings with members of the community, alumni, and students alike to get their input. They've implemented and conducted surveys, and they've received input from those at those town hall meetings. Nearly 8,000 respondents have participated in these discussions. The process has been very open, very thorough. The recommendation of that task force is expected to come before the president of the university as soon as next week. At that time, the president will have the ability to put into effect that process, selecting attorneys, marketing personnel, alumni, students, athletes, and anyone else that committee recommended to move forward with the university nickname and logo. Now let me be clear, and as I've stated this once, that this process was not to name a new nickname, but merely identify the process. Proponents of this bill, of House Bill 1155, came to your House Education Committee and requested that we extend this moratorium for an additional 2.5 years. Proponents were concerned that some residents of North Dakota, some populations, have not been included in the process. Bill's sponsor even acknowledged that the use of the name of this university, the University of North Dakota, and the moniker that is continuing to be used, the interlocking ND, be sufficient indefinitely, be an appropriate name and recognition for the university. House Bill 1155 does not require that the university use the name the Fighting Sioux or any affiliated logos. nor does it accomplish the objective of requiring additional people to be a part of the process, nor does it accomplish the goal of implementing the interlocking ND as the official moniker of the university. If passed, House Bill 1155 merely prevents the university from working with alumni, students, supporters, and fans from adopting and implementing a nickname and logo that the university can use permanently. The origin of the moratorium is understood by many, and this has been a very emotional and contentious debate. I think we all in this chamber have a connection to the university, either as alumni ourselves, as fans, as friends of those who go and cheer on the hockey team or any of the other athletic programs at the University of North Dakota. But the effects of this moratorium are incredibly real. From a retail side, the University of North Dakota receives royalties when selling licensed products. In 2012, the university hit an all-time high in royalty revenues at nearly $691,000 in royalty revenues for that year. The year following, the university had a nearly 50% reduction in royalty revenue down to $343,000. This last year was lower still, with the fourth quarter not being reported at the time that we received these numbers, but they'd only received $174,000. The trend continues because the people in this state, alumni, fans, and students, are waiting to purchase their new jerseys, those Christmas presents that we all look forward to under the tree. They're waiting to purchase those until a solution has been finalized, and that is not happening and would not continue to happen if House Bill 1155 were to become law. I should also mention that individual retailers are also feeling the pinch. A popular athletic retail store, Shields, has seen a drop from 16% in revenue from 2012 to 13, a 19% drop from 13 to 14, and is budgeting a 20% reduction in sales regarding UND apparel for this coming year. Again, these effects are incredibly real. But I will say, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, the real reason that your House Education Committee gave this a do not pass recommendation is because of the effect that this has felt upon the students. Last year, the University of North Dakota women's basketball team had an incredible accomplishment. That team represented our state at the NCAA basketball tournament. Joined with 63 other teams, those women held their head high and competed for the first time on the national stage for a national championship. And yet, that honor was overshadowed by the lack of their name. They were recognized as the University of North Dakota Grizzlies, as the University of North Dakota Fighting Question Marks. And that is not what those women competed for. Was to be in front of millions of Americans competing for their school on behalf of their state for a national championship. And yet they were recognized as the school without the name. Mr. Speaker, members of the Assembly, as I've said, this is an incredibly emotional issue, but I will be emphatically clear that House Bill 1155 merely extends a moratorium from which the university can move forward, research the issue, and choose a proper nickname and moniker. It does not instate any name. It does not mandate inclusion of anyone who's been left out. I believe, and I believe that the committee, in its overwhelming vote of 9-2, urges this body to reject House Bill 1155 and allow the University of North Dakota to move forward in their process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Lauser.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly. I want to thank the Education Committee for providing a good forum and debate for this bill. 4 years ago, there was a lot of emotion attached to a nickname and a logo bill. This bill does one thing. It extends the moratorium that no nickname or logo for another 2.5 years. It does not bring back a former name, nor does it name a new nickname. First, I'd like to address the fiscal note attached to this bill. The note is due to UND having someone answer questions and fielding suggestions on this issue for a time period that the moratorium is in place. At a salary of $53,300 a year for 34 hours a week for 2 years. It reflects work that's already being done. They're not specifically allocated costs, so I would question the validity, but I accept that it's attached. So why the need for this bill? There's a substantial number of people in this state and out of state that have been reluctantly agreeable to the compromise of no nickname at UND. They don't get what they want, but they're agreeable to the compromise. Reasonable people can disagree on policy, but this is one of those times where reasonable people can find fair compromise. In the committee hearing, I offered testimony regarding the logos of 2 other universities, Harvard and Stanford. Those logos are an H and an S. The interlocking ND currently used at UND is not dissimilar to those great and prestigious universities. So really, the nickname is the heart of the issue. I ask the Assembly to consider this. UND has not suffered in the past 3 years. The school has not lost conference affiliation in the Big Sky or the NCHC, has not lost accreditation of any of its academic programs. Substantial investments have been made by this body to the law school and med school facilities. Student enrollment has not dropped, and excitement for school activities is up. Recruiting seems to be positive as the athletic teams are competitive, attracting top-level athletes. No school is threatened to not compete against UND due to not having a nickname. Feelings hurt by the former nickname on all sides seem to have been cooled off by the moratorium. What reasons have we heard to defeat this bill? Number one, it's time to move on. An old standby. One person cannot make the determination that a moment in time is the right time for someone else to move on. This is just the same argument used 4 years ago. It's just not a valid argument. Number two, the legislature has more important things to do. Yes, we do, and we'll address those issues in this session. For some, though, this is the important issue. Number three, the students want a nickname. Those very same students decided to attend UND, presumably knowing there was not a nickname. I would hope the students in the university would make academic and career decisions more soundly than based on a nickname. Number four, this is not a legislative issue. Unfortunately, it is. It's an extension of actions we've already taken that we were brought to that point by the NCAA. Number five, athletes want something to rally around. We heard a good example of the women's basketball team, and last year the hockey team was 0.6 seconds away from overtime from going to the national championship game. And I would suggest that the team is obviously finding motivation to rally itself. Number six, the emergency clause. The clause was attached to make the bill as a requirement to make this bill retroactive to January 1. I believe testimony in the committee stated that it would be upwards of a year before UND were to implement a new nickname anyway. So the emergency clause should not be a reason to vote against this bill. And finally, the argument against this bill, merchandise sales. I find it more than ironic that an argument for a new nickname and logo is based on the sale of merchandise. The former nickname and logo at one point was the second highest seller for college licensed merchandise in the country, with the likes of the University of North Carolina, Michigan, and Texas. The argument that a new logo and nickname is needed to produce a level of sales that an obviously popular logo and nickname previously produced is being made by the same entities that argued for the retirement of that very same popular nickname and logo. I'd ask this body to consider the difference between a potential increase in merchandise sales against the potential loss of voluntary donations from alienated alumni and supporters of UND, which I believe is a very real and valid concern. Some have asked why a two-time graduate of Minot State University brought this bill. I've had UND in my heart since I lived in grade school, since I lived in Grand Forks and my mother could go to law school. I was a Lake Agassiz Mustang. Family circumstances out of high school changed my plans to attend UND, and I canceled my enrollment. As a legislator, I'm asked to vote on bills pertinent to UND, and as a taxpayer that involuntarily pays $1 million per property owned to the med school and a supporter of the school, I think it's appropriate. This, after all, is the University of North Dakota, not the University of Grand Forks or the University of any district. Mr. Speaker and members of the Assembly, nobody gets everything they want with this bill, but everybody can get behind North Dakota. Officially, UND would proceed without a nickname for the foreseeable future. Unofficially, UND could be the Flicker Tails, the Rough Riders, the Storm, or the Fighting Frackers. I ask this body to remove any emotion and apply logic and reason to this bill and vote yet. Actually, I ask for a symbolic green vote on House Bill 1155, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Rich Becker.
Mr. Speaker, would Representative Mock be open to a question and a comment?
Representative Mock.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield to a question, yes.
Representative Mock, I wanted to compliment you on your summary of how you presented this. I think you covered pretty much every aspect. But the reason I wanted to speak to the Assembly today is I was asked to support Representative Lauser's bill, and I was more than pleased to have that opportunity to do so. The question that I have for you, I did give testimony, as you know, and then I had to leave for other committee work, so I wasn't there to hear the whole discussions of your committee. So my question is, was there any acknowledgement in the discussions to the Native Americans? They are the one group, to the best of my knowledge, that have not been asked to participate at any time. They have not been asked to come to the table. I hear that repeatedly from both Spirit Lake and Standing Rock, but mostly Spirit Lake. Spirit Lake was allowed, their people were allowed to vote, and they voted overwhelmingly, close to 68 or 69% to retain the name. A person by the name of Eunice Davidson, who many people in this assembly know, has come to me and said, we don't expect to get the Fighting Sioux logo back. We lost that fight. We were never given a chance to defend it, but we accept it. All we're asking is a gift was given to the University of North Dakota by the Sioux people 80-some years ago. It was reinforced in 1969 in an official pipe ceremony with Dr. Starcher at the time, president of the University of North Dakota. The wounds are deep, as you testified and acknowledged. 3 years have gone by, and the wounds have not really healed by certainly those that were pro the name, but even those that were against it are not happy with the process and the time that it's taking. And 3 years have come and gone, and where are we? So what I'm basically asking Representative Mock is if you could update, was there any acknowledgement that the Native people, it appears, have been purposefully kept out of this discussion? And I'll just end my comment by saying that the word that I have, what hurts the most for our Native American friends, is the depiction of the word Sioux as being dirty or nasty or demeaning, when in fact we have kept the Sioux Award as the highest award given to an alumnus at UND, the Sioux Award. There was no change in the Ralph Engelstad Arena from the Sioux Shop or the Betty Sioux Center. The NCAA itself came for a final inspection for UND to have done everything that was indicated in the consent decree. And all of the Sioux logos on the outside of the hockey arena, which were to be removed, the NCAA said, well, you don't have to take those down really. We will call them symbols, not logos. So there seems to be an awful lot to do with this whole issue that keeps the wounds open. And all I'm asking is if this bill were to be revoted on or the time extended to allow the Native American population to be officially involved and to officially have an opportunity to weigh in on this. All they want is some recognition of the word Sioux as part of the University of North Dakota's identification. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Mock. You have a tough job, and I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Representative Mock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to Representative Becker's question. It did come up in testimony. I don't know, I don't recall if you were there for the testimony. The university president, Dr. Robert Kelly, did inform us of the process by which this existing task force worked, holding open meetings, town hall meetings in Grand Forks, Fargo, Bismarck, and Minot, as well as sending out surveys statewide. I'll read a brief statement from his testimony, and then and hopefully that suffices. It's to the best that our committee received for information. President stated in his testimony that implementing surveys and they conducted meetings that resulted in about 8,000 responses on how to select a new nickname. The process has been open, transparent, and inclusive, and has been documented extensively in the media. and then goes on to comment regarding the cost that the bill's sponsor had alluded to in his most recent floor speech. My understanding is that there is one Native American representative on the 13-member task force that is included either, and I do not recall if it was as one of the alumni or if it was one of the students. I should also note that this bill does not require any additional inclusion of any organization from any tribe or entity. It merely extends the moratorium, and as I believe the bill sponsors would hope, it would create an invitation for more people. But however, the President had alluded that the opportunity for input was extended far and wide and was not, did not discriminate against who could participate in the process. That was the most accurate information we received at the time of the hearing, and I've received no other information since that hearing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Rich Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Mock, thank you. The only thing I could add to that, I believe that there was a student who was one of the members, but that student has told his connections at Spirit Lake that he feels totally overwhelmed, not able to express his personal feelings. And in fact, when they had the meetings in Grand Forks, there was a good number of people that came from Spirit Lake. They were allowed to enter the room, but they were not allowed to speak in any way, form, or fashion. I think what I'm trying to say is that the process has been in error from the start. And as I said in my testimony, the lack of sales, no matter what new name UND comes up with in the short term, there's a general feeling among most people that all that UND is trying to do is make lemonade out of a lemon. And they pretty much got themselves in that position to begin with. So I would encourage this assembly to give thought to rethinking this vote, going through for another 2.5 years, hopefully would encourage the university to officially bring Native Americans from both Standing Rock and Spirit Lake into the process, and whatever comes out of that is what comes out of it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the Assembly. Standing Rock Sioux Tribal Chairman David Archambault was asked that I, as his legislative representative, vote no on this issue, and I'm going to honor that request.
Is there further discussion? Representative Nathy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would hope this body would uphold the committee's recommendation. You know, we have talked this issue to death since 2011 from every which way angle possible. I have to respectfully disagree with my good friend Scott Lauser here about the question of move on. We do need to move on. The reason being is the public told us so in June of 12 when they had the referendum. When they passed that referendum, they were in a sense telling us, move on. The UND was given that 1.5-year cooling period to go through some things, let people calm down. They abided by it, and now they're starting up the process. And now this bill, we want to put another 2-year cooling period on this? I think it's time we move on with this process. UND, if you don't like the process that UND is doing, take it up with UND. We cannot micromanage how they're going to decide their logo, how they go about their logo. If somebody doesn't get heard at a hearing, that is UND's trouble. That's UND's problem. I think it's a reasonable request. It's just time to move forward. Thank you.
Representative Schatz.
Mr. Speaker, would Representative Schmidt yield to a question?
Representative Schmidt.
I will.
Representative Schmidt, as you know, the NCAA required 2 tribes to vote, and one voted overwhelmingly. The other one did not vote at all. I was wondering why they didn't vote.
As I, on my floor speech 2 years ago, in support of maintaining the Standing Rock, in maintaining the Fighting Sioux, They did not vote then, and I said at that time, they're not going to renew their wedding vows. They weren't going to vote for whatever reason it was. I do not know what that is. I'm not going to ask them what that is, and I'm going to stand with what the present chairman, who was newly elected, requested to be done.
The House has before it for final consideration House Bill 1155. The clerk will open the key and you may record your vote. Has every member voted? Do any members wish to change their vote? The key will be closed and the clerk will take the record. The final vote shows 21 yea, 62 nay, 11 not voting. House Bill 1155 is declared failed.